Do we have a forum?
If you call the meeting to order, we'll determine that.
Where's my agenda? I don't have my agenda. Right here. Thank you very much. Okay, call the meeting order and please determine whether we have a forum.
Yes, sir. Director Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Tommy Favai. Director Desi Alvarez. Director Scott Houston. President Don Deere.
Here.
President Deere, we do have 2 members of the board of directors and we are able to move forward with our discussion items.
We don't have committee members here.
No, we're just 1 board member short of the quorum, but we do not have any action items for today.
Okay, so we'll go on with the. Is there any public comment?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public who would like to speak on a public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. And I do not see any request for public comment.
All right, we'll go to item 4 on the agenda, discussion items. 4A.
Yes, Mr. President, before we move to 4A, I did want to point out that we have a very special guest with us today. We have Metropolitan Water District's General Manager, Shivaji Deshmukh. So I wanted to open it up for him to provide any initial comments or MWD updates.
Thank you, EJ. Good to see you, Director Deere.
You too, Shivaji. It's good to see you. You made good.
Thanks. Hello to Director Gray online. I'll keep it really short today. I'm here to join Shanti and talk about the Colorado River, but I'd prefer we spend most of the time on that, but also happy to answer any questions following that update. So that's all I have, EJ.
Well, thank you very much, Shivaji. With that in mind, because I do know that you have, or do you need to leave at 1:15?
Yes.
Why don't we start off with item 4C, which is an update on the Lower Basin proposal for post-2026 operations. And for the presentation, we do have Shanti Rasut from the Colorado River Resources Policy Manager of Metropolitan Water District. So Shanti, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and for the opportunity to talk to you about where the Colorado River negotiations stand and the progress of the Lower Basin proposal. The 2007 interim guidelines that govern the Colorado River system reservoirs are operated by rules that are set to expire on September 30th. That's the end of the current water year. And the federal government is in the process of developing replacement for those guidelines currently. What gets decided in the next several weeks will determine how reliable our Colorado River supply is over the next decade. And first is where things stand with the federal process. The Colorado River system reservoirs are operated by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which is part of the Interior Department. And any new federal agency action, like the adoption of operational guidelines, first goes through a federal environmental review. The draft version of the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, came out in January. It laid out the 5 possible approaches that the Interior Department is now considering and drew more than 18,000 public comments. The comment period closed in March. Since then, the Interior Department has been narrowing towards a single approach, what they are currently calling the preliminary preferred alternative. And the timeline on this slide is the part to hold on to. The final EIS was supposed to come out late this month, and the Secretary is supposed to sign the decision or the record of decision in late July. However, as we get closer to those dates, it becomes more likely that the deadlines may slip. But even if the dates slip a bit, the decisions being made over the next few weeks will set operations for 2027 and 2028. Can I pass this slide? Let me explain the shape of what's being decided because it works differently from how the river has been run before. The old approach spelled out detailed operating rules that were in place for 20 years. Instead of using that approach that was used in the post-2026 guidelines, Reclamation is proposing a 10-year framework that is relatively bare bones. It includes a set of principles and what they're calling sideboards, which are a set of outer ranges under which the system must operate. And that 10-year framework will be the record of decision. Then Reclamation will adopt operational guidelines within that framework every 2 years. And those guidelines will be implemented each year through an annual operating plan. This is a proposed alternative, is federally structured. It is not a negotiated 7 states consensus. Next slide, please. In the absence of a 7-state deal, 3 lower basin states, California, Arizona, and Nevada, put forward their own workable plan for operating in 2027 and 2028. And it's a little hard to see the numbers in the room, but here are what those numbers are and why they matter to us. Together, the 3 states have agreed to address the evaporative and system losses in the lower basin by agreeing to take 1.25 million acre feet of annual reductions. California's share is 440,000 acre feet annually, figure in the right box, and Arizona agreed to take 760,000 acre feet, and Nevada takes 50,000 acre feet. 2 things about California's piece. First, we can meet it one of 2 ways: by ordering less water from the river or by drawing on what water we have previously banked. And I'll come back to the banked water because it's pivotal to California's ability to participate in these reductions. Second, California would also commit to an additional 300,000 acre feet of voluntary conservation with federal funding available for it. Now, the point of at the bottom of the slide, the one that I want to leave you with, is that California's willingness to take these reductions, including reductions that are not legally required for California to take first, was offered on a condition, and that condition was that access terms to our ICS bank, or the banked water in Lake Mead, and that is still being negotiated. The reduction and the access question are a single package. Pull them apart and the deal doesn't hold together. Please advance the slide. So let me explain the banked water briefly, because it's Metropolitan's such central interest at this stage of the negotiation. The 2007 interim guidelines and 2019 drought contingency plan gave us the right to store conserved water in Lake Mead and draw it down later. The intentionally created surplus, or ICS program, is like a savings account held inside the reservoir. It is one of our most important dry year tools. Here's the problem, and it's the heart of the matter. A savings account is only worth what you can withdraw. And as Lake Mead falls, the right to pull that water gets restricted. The graphic on the right shows the reservoir's elevation. The forecast for the start of 2027 is about 1,035 feet elevation in Lake Mead, just above where restrictions start to kick in. But the band on the right, between 1,025 feet and 1,000 feet, is whether we can get our own stored water out and on what terms, and that's exactly what is being negotiated. In that zone, the Interior Secretary is asserting the authority to deny or reduce deliveries due to low reservoir elevations. What Metropolitan is pushing for is straightforward, and it's on this slide: a process for getting our stored water out below 1,025 feet that is predictable, has firm timelines, and runs on objective criteria, not open-ended federal discretion. We need to know when we need the water that we can actually get it out. Next slide, please. This is why the access terms drive our position, and I want to connect the 2 halves directly. Metropolitan support for California's Taking these out of priority reductions is contingent on reliable access to our stored water in that 1,025 to 1,000 foot band in Lake Mead. And you can see why on the two boxes. You can see the contrast is that if access is firm and rules-based, our stored water is there when we need it. Our costs to replace supply stays bounded, and our reliability planning holds. If access is, on the other hand, discretionary or deniable, we'd be agreeing to give up water now against a promise that we can't bank on. And that risk shifts squarely onto Metropolitan. And that's the crux. Out of priority reductions without firm recovery of our stored water moves risk onto us. Next slide, please. Two variables set our exposure. The first is in the size of our reduction obligation. California's contractors have not yet agreed among themselves on how to divide the state's share. And Metropolitan may end up being the backstop for California's commitment, subject to a final deal with California. Metropolitan needs to be able to access ICS to meet its share of the obligation, particularly if Metropolitan is acting as a backstop for California's obligations. The second variable is the one I've been discussing, whether our access to stored water is firm or discretionary. That goes directly to what it costs us to replace supply and how confidently we can plan on our Colorado River supplies. The number on the right frames the stakes. Metropolitan currently holds roughly 1.6 million acre feet of stored water in Lake Mead, and that is a major dry year asset for Metropolitan, but it is only worth as much as our ability to deliver it. So the bottom line is simple. Firm access protects our supply and bounds our costs. Discretionary access increases the risk to Metropolitan's dry year reliability. Still open and still consequential for us is the access terms, the final split, the reductions within California, and the surplus rules, which are yet to be determined. Next slide, please. Here's what to watch for next. The federal decision is expected to be signed in late July, although that seems a bit ambitious with each day that passes. The 2027 annual operating plan is set to follow in August, and tentatively in September or later this fall, the Metropolitan Board may be asked to authorize implementation agreements. Two things we're tracking that I'm not covering in depth today is first, how the federal government sequences the actions that protect Glen Canyon Dam infrastructure at Lake Powell, because Powell is currently at historically low elevations. How reclamation sequences actions to protect Glen Canyon Dam infrastructure affects Lake Mead's levels, and in turn, the size of lower basin shortages. The second is the successor to the current treaty minute with Mexico that expires this year. A new minute will be negotiated on separate diplomatic track, but the lower basin states are asking that Mexico take reductions in parity with domestic cuts in the lower basin. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
And Director Jeter, if I don't know if Director Gordon Gray has any questions online.
Director Gray?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. First, let me thank MWD's general manager for being here and welcome back home. But thank you so much for being here. I couldn't hear all of the presentation, and I know I'm on the Met board, and there's a lot of moving parts. And I guess kind of a general question, and are those timelines pretty good timelines? Do you anticipate them not being met? Some of the things, the conditions that are basically going to lead to some kind of resolution for the Colorado River. Shivaji, do you think those are realistic timelines and things that are being asked for?
Thanks, Director Gray. I'll start and I'll have Shanti give her perspective, but since I started in this position 6 months ago, and actually at Met 8 months ago, there have been a number of deadlines and they've all passed without the agreement that was anticipated to match each one of those milestones. So I come into it with a lot of skepticism, but ultimately there's a final deadline that's required for these operating guidelines, and we're getting very close to that. And that's in October. But Shanti, can you provide a little more detail on that?
So yes, Director Gray, September 30th is the end of the water year. The current guidelines expire on that date. Reclamation has to have rules in place to operate Lake Powell by October 1st. So I anticipate that they will have a record of decision done by October 1st at the very latest. There is a bit more wiggle room when it comes to Lake Mead operations because the decree that's operated on runs on a calendar year. So we may be seeing things pushed back, and we may be asked to take implementation agreement actions after the Lake Powell operations have already started. But everything for Lake Mead has to be done by the very latest, the end of this calendar year.
Okay. But thank you so much. Thank you for that input.
Other questions?
I had a question. So when we talk about the lower basin proposal, I assume obviously that the lower basin states are all on board. However, if you look at kind of the headlines in Arizona newspapers, they continuously talk about investing in legal resources, potentially engaging in litigation. I think the last headline I read talked about them pressuring to get mediators and kind of third parties more engaged. Do you think, or do you feel that this proposal is supported by all of the lower basin states, and that this proposal could be in lieu of litigation or could help us avoid litigation?
So that's an excellent question because what is described in the press, like it's sometimes hard to orient like where it's focused. And so there, I would say that I was told that you're a lawyer, so I'm going to talk to you because this is particularly relevant for you. So so there are a number of different issues that may be the subject of litigation. The piece that I was describing as the lower basin agreement has been a negotiated agreement among the 3 lower basin states. And the core of that is the agreement to take that 1.25 million acre feet in annual reductions to address the evaporative system losses. We're causing Lake Mead to decline year after year, even though everybody was staying within their legal limits of what they're allowed to take. So I think that piece is going to hold. We're the ones who are really holding back on that and saying that like, we have to make sure that we get the ICS rules that we need to place that. But Arizona is fully supportive of that piece of it. Arizona has been has had a lot of public statements about their frustration with the upper basin not being willing to commit to any cuts when there are reductions that are required above the 1.25 annually for the lower basin, because their view has been consistently throughout this process that if the lower basin is taking cuts and the upper basin particularly is not making its compact deliveries, the upper basin has to meet the lower basin, 50-50 with any additional reductions. The upper basin has never been willing to make that commitment. And so that's a piece of it. There's potential for interstate compact litigation between states because the compact volume, what sometimes gets called press the tripwire, that's going to be hit later this summer. And so there is going to be the potential for a ripeness of litigation, a litigation claim there. So that's one issue still outstanding. Arizona, Arizona's governor, they have made lots of public statements about this. And then the other piece is that there's potential for NEPA challenges. And this comes not just from the state of Arizona, but also importantly from the Central Arizona Project, which submitted a public comment back in March to the DEIS, which was 3,000 pages long, included all the appendices. And it really looked like they were putting like everything in a potential administrative record for a NEPA challenge. And so there are at least two different fronts where it's possible for litigation, but it's not really lower basin. We're not focused on each other right now. Arizona may be focused on the upper basin for compact purposes, and they may be focused on, depending on what the record of decision ultimately is for NEPA challenges.
And EJ, wanted to, since you brought up headlines, another theme in recent headlines, especially the upper basin, is some statements about the lower basin not doing enough and using too much water. And obviously we all, and I think it would resonate with West Basin in this area, take a lot of offense to that because the Southwest, specifically California, has prioritized conservation, local supply development. So it's very important that we continue and think about ways to unite our message. That's something that Arizona and Nevada share with us with their commitment to turf removal, conservation, recycled water. And related to that, there's also something that we're trying to bring clarity to, that there's an idea that if California shifted more to ocean desalination, that could solve the Colorado River's problem. And we all know that we definitely want to keep evaluating options, but that's not a practicality for us or a regional solution. So we have some opportunities to coordinate and increase our messaging when it comes to what California has done, especially within the Met area, especially within service areas like West Basin.
Another question from Matt.
Thank you, Shanti and Shivaji. Regarding the ICS access, I guess I'm just curious on, in terms of all the important things that you're negotiating, where does that kind of fall right now? It sounds like it's high up there, if not at the top. And is there any pushback that you're receiving on that from other states or the federal government? Could you provide a little more detail about that?
Yes, so it is the central issue for us at this stage of the negotiations, because it's really important, particularly because we don't have the intra-California agreement worked out yet, that we know that we'll be able to access that ICS when we're going to need it. Like if California is making this commitment and we don't have an agreement in place, and we have, let's say next year's dry year, like we need to know that we'll be able to use some of that ICS to meet at least our share of the obligation without having to reduce our Colorado River deliveries. So if we have a dry state water project here, we need to make sure that we can access our full allocation in those dry years. And so that's why it's so important to us. So I will say that what we're trying to negotiate is access, and it's mostly not to actually deliver the ICS, but to use the ICS to meet our obligation. And so it's not going to reduce the elevation of the reservoir, but it's not really going to increase it either. But we want to be able to use it for that purpose. And everybody understands that that's essential for our participation. And there's nobody else, and I can say this particularly to a member agency, like Metropolitan is stepping up in a way that no one else is. There is no one else who has offered to do something they're not legally obligated to do. What Southern Nevada Water Authority is obligated to do, it's doing less than even Reclamation said. What Arizona is doing, it's taking a lot less than it's obligated to take on paper. The upper basin, they're not doing anything additional that they weren't obligated to do. And in California, none of the other contractors have offered to do anything yet. Metropolitan is really the only one that is stepping forward for the good of the basin, for the good of the system, and to create this stability. And so I think everybody knows that if they pull out this piece, like the whole thing could fall apart. And so what I'll say that as context to for support that people have. It's grudging though, because I will say that Lake Mead is going to be at historically low elevations. It's going to, a lot of people are going to be shocked. Speaking about press coverage, there's going to be a lot of alarming press coverage that's coming out. The releases from Powell this year are the lowest they've been since Powell was first built by a lot. And the next year, what we're looking at is that they're going to be the lowest that they've ever been by a lot. And what that means is that the elevation in Lake Mead, we get buffered by about a year, but like once a year passes, Mead starts to decline precipitously. We could be down below the elevation that we're targeting to be able to have access to as early as next summer, depending on what next winter is like. The rosy scenario right now is that it stays in that band, but that's still the historically low elevation. And it's relevant for Metropolitan also as a power contractor for Hoover, because the elevation, once Mead gets below elevation 1035, which it's forecast to do at the end of this year, the power generation capacity at Hoover Dam declines by 70%. So it's going to, I don't want to create like this false impression that things are going to be rosy. It's just this is what we need to be able, like as staff, to ask the board to give up something. We have to get this benefit for it. And this is the benefit that we're asking for. We think it's reasonable because it doesn't actually cause a decline to Lake Mead. And it does help stabilize the system in all of the other ways that like benefit everyone, including Metropolitan. But there are people who, particularly at Interior and at Reclamation, who are nervous about allowing any access to ICS below 1,025 and 1,000. But I think we're there. We've had good discussions with them.
And then we do have one question online. Chuck Scheich, thank you for your patience. Chuck, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Shanti, for that excellent presentation. I know that the central question, of course, is how the allocation is going to be among the various states in the upper and lower states. But I do have a question. You mentioned that basically in California, you indicate that Metropolitan may be the backstop for some of our obligations. Can you maybe explain that and what that impact might look like to Metropolitan?
So it's possible that if say we're working hard towards reaching an intra-California agreement, and Shivaji and Bill Hazenkamp are leading up those negotiations. And I will just say that in the context of like the backstop is really if we have a scenario in which the agreements come too late for people to secure HIPAA compliance or CEQA compliance in the time that we would have to start making California's contribution. Metropolitan may have to step in for those periods of months that it takes to get coverage for programs like in places like Imperial Irrigation District, which they haven't even started a CEQA process because we don't have things settled yet. And so like that's really the scenario in which we're at least being prepared that there could be a possibility, particularly in that first year, of Metropolitan having to be a backstop.
But in terms of water supply impacts, we don't see any immediate impact.
Correct. And that's because we are working so hard to secure our ability to use our ICS for that purpose.
In general, that would be more of an interim measure, though, wouldn't be a ongoing situation.
That's right. So that would just, and what we're talking about today is really just the operations for 2027 and 2028.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions on this item? Okay, President Deere, we're ready to move forward with item 4A, which is our federal legislative update. Online, we do have Abby Schneider joining us from, I assume, Washington, D.C. She is the Executive Legislative Representative for Metropolitan Water District. Abby, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Before I get started, I'll just want to confirm you all can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Here comes my slides, but I really appreciate the opportunity to provide the update. So thank you for having me. And you had it up briefly. There we go. Next slide, please. Right now, it feels like Congress is on an extended summer break. Both chambers adjourned earlier in June than expected, and lawmakers are still enjoying their 4th of July recess. They won't return to DC until next week. The House plans to stay in session until July 24th and the Senate until August 7th. Though those dates may change, there's a non-zero chance Congress will once again leave town earlier than scheduled. It's been sweltering in DC, and neither chamber has been able to move legislation through their floor proceedings. In short, Congress is slowing down more than usual for this time of year. Looking ahead, there are only about 20 days between now and the November midterm elections when both chambers will be in session at the same time. 10 of those days are in July and the rest in September. Each chamber will be in town individually for a bit longer, but the window to pass legislation before November is closing quickly. It's a very challenging environment for getting anything enacted into law. Next slide, please. The federal fiscal year ends on September 30th, the same day as the water year, and summer is typically the critical time to advance appropriation bills. If these bills are not enacted by the end of the fiscal year, Congress can either allow the government to shut down or pass a continuing resolution that temporarily funds federal agencies and programs at current fiscal year levels. Not surprisingly, Congress is nowhere close to meeting the September 30th deadline. In fact, the last time Congress passed all 12 appropriation bills on time was for fiscal year 1996, when Bill Clinton was president. So far, only the House has advanced FY27 appropriations bills. As the chart shows, the House rejected the administration's proposed elimination of several reclamation water programs used by Metropolitan and our member agencies. Similar to FY26, the House bill provides robust funding for the reclamation programs we rely on. Of course, the House is only half of Congress. The Senate has not yet released its version of the bill. Based on last year, I expect the Senate funding levels for the Water Smart program to align more closely with the president's budget request. These programs are viewed by many as primarily benefiting California, and since neither California senator sits on the Appropriations Committee, it's difficult to ensure these programs are funded. While I don't expect the House's higher funding levels to be enacted, I will continue advocating for them. And before leaving appropriations, I want to flag one important point. If you're waiting to hear whether your FY27 congressionally directed earmark project will receive funding, remember that continuing resolutions do not fund these projects. Funding only becomes available once the full appropriations bill is enacted. Next slide, please. I was asked to address the impact of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, ending on Reclamation's Water Smart programs, specifically the Large-Scale Water Recycling Program and Title 16 Water Recycling Competitive Grant Program. The impact this will have on each of these programs is slightly different, and it's important to understand the distinctions. I'll begin with Reclamation's Large-Scale Water Recycling Program. This program was created in the IIJA in 2021 and was provided with $450 million in funding over 5 years. It took some time for Reclamation to stand up this new program, and as a result, the first round of funding wasn't awarded until 2024. Earlier this year, Reclamation released a final
Abby, you froze up. Can you hear us?
I texted her, EJ.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Abby, we can see you moving now.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
That's very odd. I have very solid internet connection. All right. Maybe it was the really bad news about the large scale program. It broke the internet's heart. I'm going with that. Holler again if you can't hear me. As I was saying, the program's going to sunset and there'll be no funding through this program available to advance projects like our Pure Water project. But if the internet can hold, there is a glimmer of hope, internet, so don't crash. A Senate bill, the Large Scale Water Recycling Reauthorization Act, S3693, by Senators Cortez Masto, a Democrat from Nevada, and Curtis, a Republican from Utah, was approved by the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee in June and is now eligible to be voted on by the full Senate. There is also a bipartisan House companion bill, H.R. 6204, by Representative Lee, a Democrat from Nevada, and Ciscomani, a Republican from Arizona. Unfortunately, the House bill has yet to secure a hearing, and House leadership is resistant to extending IIJA-created programs. Senator Padilla also extends the large-scale water recycling program for 5 more years in the More Water Act. This bill had a hearing in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee back in March, but has not advanced since then. Given how few days Congress remains in session, we might lose the large-scale program for the time being, but I'll continue advocating for the program and work hard to keep it alive. Turning now to Title 16, the Water Recycling Competitive Grant Program. This program was originally authorized in 2016 and then reauthorized and significantly boosted in the IIJA. In addition to yearly appropriations, like I showed in the last slide, the program received $550 million in IIJA funds over 5 years. Reclamation awarded $310 million of the IIJA funds in FY22 and continued to award funding for new projects ever since. The final notice of funding opportunity utilizing the remaining IIJA funds closes in August. Total program funding will shrink dramatically in FY27, limited to just annual appropriations. If you recall from the last slide, there was just $12.5 million in FY26, an all-time low. In prior years, the program has received $20 million in yearly appropriation. The program also won't be authorized, but it's important to keep in mind around 25% of all programs that receive funding each fiscal year are not authorized. So while it's not great, it's not an insurmountable hurdle to securing yearly appropriations. Additionally, I'd be remiss not to once again highlight Senator Padilla's bill, the More Water Act. It extends the authorization for the program for another 5 years. And this concludes my report. And if I haven't depressed you too much, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Apparently not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abby.
Director Deere, I just want to thank, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Director Gray.
Thank you, Director Deere. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Abby, for your report this afternoon. I don't have any questions. Just want to say hello and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Okay, we'll go on to the next agenda item, which is B, 4B.
Yes, President Deere. This brings us to the state legislative update. And for this presentation, we do have Jay Jefferson II, Executive Legislative Representative for Metropolitan Water District. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Next slide, please. And so good afternoon, MWD Caucus members. So I'm here to provide an update on legislative activities in Sacramento. As you may know, we have a Met board meeting just next week. And so I'm glad to be able to spend some time with you to give a preview of some of the topics we'll be discussing. Next slide, please. So starting with the legislative calendar, as we move through July, the legislature has reached another really important milestone. July 2nd marks the deadline for policy committees to pass bills, and that same day begins the annual summer recess. Legislators will then return for session on August 3rd, which begins the final month of legislative session. Historically, August is when we see the greatest amount of legislative activity, where we'll continue to see things play out through budget trailer bills and amendments to legislation on key policy issues. Next slide, please. So turning now to the state budget. On June 22nd, Governor Newsom and legislative leaders announced a final budget agreement with the legislature approved very shortly thereafter. The final budget includes about $351 billion in total state spending, while laying out a balanced budget for the next 2 fiscal years. The final agreement reduces projected long-term operating deficits. It maintains a significant reserve balance and also avoids many of the deeper reductions that have been proposed earlier in the governor's proposal. One notable aspect of this year's budget and its projected revenue outlook is that it relies not only on reducing spending, but also looks to include several new tax and revenue measures, ranging from limits on business tax credits, funding for Medi-Cal, and sales taxes on digital software. The most significant of these changes from a public agency perspective is the sales tax on digital software transactions. While the state is not increasing the sales tax rate itself, it is broadening the types of purchases that are now taxable. The intent is to capture the shifts in consumer behavior, moving away from buying physical software products. Beyond this, we're continuing to watch for the state's investments in water and climate issues. The final spending plans for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the Proposition 4 climate bond allocations were intentionally deferred until we return from the recess. This is keeping in mind that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund spending plan will need to be renegotiated in light of its reduced revenue estimate from $4 billion a year to now $2 billion annually. We will continue engaging in and monitoring the process as we move through the final stretch of legislative session. Next slide, please. So now looking at some legislative priorities on the State Water Project. So AB 2215 would extend the time for the Department of Water Resources to maximize use of its existing water rights. After this bill successfully passed with bipartisan support off the Assembly floor, the bill unfortunately did not move through Senate Policy Committee after committee amendments were presented to the author and sponsors that we could not accept. Extending the time to maximize the State Water Project's water right remains a critical priority for Metropolitan and the state water contractors. While these recent challenges in committee represent a very disappointing setback, we'll continue to pursue pathways to ensure the State Water Project provides reliable water supplies in response to climate change. Moving on to the topic of subsidence, SB 872 would establish a funding framework focused on addressing the challenges of subsidence and delta levee repairs. This bill is sponsored by both the state water contractors and Restore the Delta and has enjoyed strong support throughout the legislative process. This bill is currently in Assembly Appropriations Committee. And for the last proposal concerning the State Water Project, SB 952 would provide DWR with additional flexibility when procuring renewable and zero carbon energy to operate the State Water Project. Given the significant amount of energy required to move water throughout California, this measure supports both the state's 100% clean energy goals and long-term operational reliability. SB 952 is also in Assembly Appropriations Committee. Next slide, please. So looking at Proposition 4 implementation and water affordability. AB 35 would streamline distribution of Prop 4 funding by exempting the allocations from having to go through the regulatory process. This is intended to ensure that funds get out the door quicker and into the hands of agencies working on critical projects. This bill passed out of the legislature and is now on the governor's desk waiting for action. The other two measures, AB 2739 and SB 1125, continue the legislature's broader discussion around statewide water affordability. Together, these bills seek to establish a framework for providing financial assistance for low-income ratepayers and local infrastructure projects. Both of these bills enjoy support from water agencies and environmental justice groups and are both currently in Appropriations Committee, where a decision will be made on whether these bills move forward on August 13th. Next slide, please. And so turning next to some issues affecting water system operations more broadly. The first is SB 1153, which addresses wildfire liability and is sponsored by Aqua. This bill seeks to provide greater legal certainty for water agencies when wildfire damages occur that were not directly caused by the agency. SB 1153 would also require an assessment to determine how resilient a water system is against wildfire damages, including identification of backup power needs and alternative water supplies. This bill passed out of Policy Committee last week and is now in appropriations. The next set of bills deal with invasive golden mussels, which were first discovered in the Delta in 2024 and have since spread rapidly throughout the state. AB 1772 seeks to support invasive mussel control efforts by establishing statewide standards for monitoring and decontamination activities at recreational reservoirs. We're continuing to monitor the progress of this bill and are actively involved with an Aqua working group developing amendments. This bill is currently in Senate Appropriations Committee. And then AB 1894 is sponsored by Upper District and will prohibit local agencies from blocking deliveries of imported water due to the presence of invasive mussels. The bill was recently amended to clarify that these deliveries can continue as long as there is a state-approved control plan. The bill passed out of Policy Committee and is currently on the Senate floor waiting for action. Metropolitan's Board of Directors will be taking up this bill at our board meeting next week, with staff providing a support recommendation. And the last bill on invasive mussels is AB 2032, which seeks to streamline implementation of control plans and research into new control measures for invasive golden mussels. Metropolitan fully supports the intention of the bill, but are concerned that the bill is only limited to golden mussels. Metropolitan has been dealing with quagga mussels for nearly 2 decades now, and zebra mussels are on the horizon. With this streamlining authority, or I should say, without this streamlining authority being broadened to include all mussels regulated by the state, the bill may not be of much benefit to Metropolitan, unfortunately. This measure is currently in Appropriations Committee. Next slide, please. And then lastly, the next 3 bills are sponsored by tribal organizations and seek to increase protections for tribal cultural resources, as well as rectify historic injustices against the tribal community. Metropolitan has a long-standing history of meaningful partnership with the tribes in our service area and appreciate the goals of these proposals. However, we do have concerns with the provisions in these bills that we believe could hinder the advancement of priority projects. Metropolitan has presented amendments to the authors and sponsors of these bills and is also working with various stakeholder organizations who have shared concerns. We do not have a position on these bills and will be presenting an information item to our board of directors next week to further discuss the policy implications and our advocacy efforts. Next slide, please. And so thank you. This concludes my presentation. Welcome any questions.
Director Gray, did you have any questions?
No, I think Mr. Jefferson for the report this morning. Thank you. No question. Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
Are there any questions in the room? Jay, I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. We greatly appreciate your time today, as well as Abby's and Shantae. Director Deere, that concludes our discussion items for today.
What's this last page here? For Indian items.
He just presented on that.
I'm not gonna. Oh, well. Doesn't need to be old.
That brings us to item 5, director's comments and future agenda items.
And Director Gray, do you have any comments?
Just thank you for everyone for the report this morning and everyone who was there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And that's our agenda for today. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.